Blog Talk Radio.
Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Guys and a Bible, right here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. I'm William Bell, and with me is Dr. Don Preston. We are delighted to be with you today, as always. Looking forward to another great study in the Word of God and in Bible prophecy as we sort out those things that are most surely believed among us. Let me say good evening to my good friend, Dr. Don Preston. How are you doing today? What's happening? I know we were just talking a few minutes ago about all this bad weather you're stirring up over in Oklahoma that you plan to push our way.
Yeah. I mean, it is literally crazy. Yesterday we were at 83 degrees. Tonight, we're supposed to have what they're calling a semi-hard freeze. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. So Jan and I have been out for the last little bit putting trash bags over her flowers, and I'm not sure it's going to do any good. She and I have the most amazing ability to kill any plant that we touch. I mean... We just, listen, I can tell you, this goes back many years. Very quick anecdote here. I went to Temple, Texas several years ago now, to preach a gospel meeting. And while we were there, after services one evening, we were talking about plants and flowers, blah, blah, blah. And I just told him, I said, look, my wife and I cannot grow anything. We can grow okra, but you throw okra in the ground, you walk off, and you forget it, and that's good with us. But other than that, we can't grow flowers of any kind. And this one lady, bless her heart, she spoke up. She said, I've got a flower. I will bring you a cutting of that so that you can take it back home. You can plant it. I will guarantee you cannot kill this flower. I don't know what kind of flower it was now. But anyway, I said, no, ma'am, you don't understand. We can kill anything. We've heard this before. And she goes, no, you can't kill this. And I said, well, okay, whatever. And she said, okay, in the morning before you leave, I'm going to bring you a cutting. I'll wrap it in damp newspaper. It'll stay alive for 2 weeks. I go, okay, that's fine. Brought it back home, planted it, and it died overnight.
That's really bad. That is really bad.
I mean, it's really bad. And so when people tell me, "Oh yeah, we've got a wonderful flower for you to plant," no, you don't. It just doesn't work because I don't know what there is about it. I don't know if we don't talk to the flowers enough. Do you talk to your flowers, William?
Well, usually I don't, but I do believe in doing that. The first time we planted tomatoes, and I know you remember that a few years ago, and we had tomatoes all over the place. I mean, they were just growing like crazy, and all the way into the fall, et cetera. They just grew. And then the next year we planted tomatoes, and I think we might have added a few things. But last year we had cucumbers, we had bell peppers, a few tomato plants, and sweet potatoes. Man, we grew a huge sweet potato, but we left it in the ground too long. We didn't know that it was out there. So I went digging up because I was going to plant some collard greens, and then I found this huge sweet potato. But they were too small. We did get a few out of the garden. But by the time that one, we discovered it was there along with a couple of others, they had grown huge and they weren't any good anymore. So this year I planted some collard greens, and I planted them, before we had that cold, and they've come up. They're thriving. They're doing well. I may put something over them tonight just in case, you blow that weather over this way. But so far they're doing fine. We got, 2 little raised gardens. I wish I had planted my entire backyard. There's not much space, as you know, but,
right.
But I mean, the plants that we've had, fed us all summer and, a little bit into the winter. And so we're now trying some collard greens, and so far they look very good, and we'll plant some other things along the way. So, I grew up with my grandmother for a little while, and she had a green thumb out of this world. I mean, her entire front porch would have plants all over it, and all kind of flowers and plants. And I learned a few things about morning glory and African violets and things like that I, would never have known had I not spent some time with her. But, and then all in the house, and I used to have to get up in the morning sometimes and either go out and water them or take the plants from either outside to inside or inside to outside. I can't remember. But anyway, so yeah, I grew up with a grandmother who just had all kind of flowers and plants all around her house, and the flower pots everywhere lining up the whole front porch. So I don't know whether any of that took with me. My grandfather also was somewhat of a farmer, and even though he worked a job, he did farm, and so I got a chance to even plant stuff and work a little bit on the farm in the fields. And we even planted small gardens. But I've always been able to throw a seed in the ground and it would come up. I mean, I've never. Well, I mean, it just does.
I'll tell you, look, my dad was a great farmer. He raised tomatoes and potatoes commercially, sold them. We used to have fruit stands, vegetable stands beside the road at different times. And my dad, oh my goodness gracious, he could raise wonderful tomatoes. And so you would think that I would have picked up something. And I'll tell you what happened right here in Ardmore some years ago. Jan decided to go to the Votech. She said, I'm so sick and tired of killing flowers and killing plants. I'm going to go to the Votech because they were going to, of course, we got the Noble Foundation, and they're world famous for their agricultural research and what have you, and they were going to offer a special class on gardening. She said, I'm going to learn how to grow things without killing them. I said, well, good luck. Okay, so toward the end of the class, she was really, really proud of herself. So she one night she goes, let's go into town. I said, what for? She said, I'm going to buy some tomato plants. She said, I'm going to buy some tomato plants. I'm going to grow us some tomatoes. Well, I absolutely dearly love fresh tomatoes. There's just nothing like that. A good bologna and cheese sandwich with a fresh tomato. Oh, my goodness gracious, that's wonderful. So anyway, we go into town, and she starts picking out some of these tomato plants that have already started growing. And I said, that's not grow. I said, that's cheating. That's not how you grow tomatoes. So we got into this loving spat with each other. And she said, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, I tell you what I can do. I said, I'm going to buy a pack or two of seeds. I'm going to dig up my own little plot of ground right out here by our fence. And you can put your plants on the back patio in your special potting soil, and the Miracle Grow. And I said, you can do all that, and I'll guarantee you what, I'm going to grow bigger and better and more tomatoes than you do. And, of course, I was just blowing hot air. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to back to bed anyway. And so I go out there, and I labored very hard, planted my seeds. She nurtured and tended her tomatoes right here on the back patio. And I want to tell you, I won that bet. My vines, my tomato vines, which I had either 8 or 10 tomato plants, and I produced 2 tomatoes that were worth eating. She did not grow 1 tomato. So she threw up her hands and was like, okay, I'm done. Never trying to grow another tomato plant, never trying to grow another flower. Well, anyway, nonetheless, the important thing was that I won the bet. That's all that mattered to me.
Well, Leora came from a family that they had, they planted plenty of crops. They had lots of farm animals too, but and she does well. She goes out now and works in the garden. She does well. She's planted some mint, and it's taking over the place. Yeah. But she loves it, and then she shares a lot of it with people. But it grows just so fast, and just really spreads really fast. So try some mint, Don. Just get your. If you can't grow mint.
Hey, you've already heard my testimony. I would have a field of black lint is what I would have. Oh, I tell you, we've gotten a lot of fun and laughs about it over the years with our different attempts, to grow this or that and the other. Now, like I said, I did grow okra some years ago. I went out in the plot where I later planted the tomato plants, seeds, and I dug an area probably, it wasn't very big, 10, 12, maybe 15 feet long, and 6 or 8 feet wide. And I went and got myself some okra plants. And I mean to tell you what, now we had okra, but I literally threw it in the ground and walked off. That's all I did. And boy, oh boy, did we have okra. So I'm really great at plants, seeds that I can just throw in the ground, walk off, forget them, and see what happens.
Well, that works.
There we are. Yeah, it works. Well, I tell you what, shifting gears here a little bit. This has not been what you would call a really super active week insofar as activity, but just today, I got an email, I got a text. Actually, it was a YouTube video comment from this gentleman. He had appeared on my YouTube video some while back and really was quite critical. He was one of those guys, you're a false teacher. This is not truth. This is not what the church has always taught, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we exchanged a little bit back and forth. He was never what you would call ugly. He was adamant, but not ugly. He was firm, but never caustic. So, you can certainly tolerate, you can certainly respect someone who holds their convictions firmly, who holds their convictions sincerely, who defends their sincerely held convictions with fervor and defends it with energy without ever being, ugly, truly ugly. And that's the way this guy was. I never actually took any great offense at anything that he said. Well, today on YouTube, he posted a formal public apology for resisting me like he did. And he said, preterism is without any doubt the truth. And he said, I am now in the process of trying to find ways that I can share this truth with my own acquaintances. But he said, I just had to contact you and extend a sincere apology to you for the unkind remarks that I made about you some months back. So I thought that was just absolutely remarkable. It takes a great deal of courage. It takes a lot of integrity to do something like that. And you really have to appreciate someone with that kind of a heart, that kind of a mind. He could have simply forgotten it. I mean, again, it's several months ago. I had put it out of my mind. I mean, you know as well as I do, William, we get that kind of negative comment on a daily basis. We don't keep track of every name and every single comment that's made to us. We've developed a pretty thick skin down through the years, each of us. So, like I said, I didn't have a specific memory of anything specifically. I did sort of kind of remember the name, but I certainly didn't remember any of the negative comments. And so here he was, all these months later, having gone through the struggle, deciding to study the issues, continuing to watch the videos. I don't know if he's read any of the books or gone to the website, read the information there or not. I really honestly don't know. The point of it is he had done enough research he had come to realize that it's not preterism that's false. It was his traditionally held views. And like I said, he had the courage, the fortitude, and the integrity to come back. He could have said, I bet Preston's forgotten me. I'm going to let it die. I'll just go my way. I'll hold to my newfound positions, and I won't tell anybody what I did and what I said. No, that's not the path he took. He stood up. He was a man, and he apologized for the things that he had said. So that was very, very heartening to receive that message from him.
Well, that's excellent. It's always good to see people, honestly confront the truth, even if initially they oppose it. But they go back and they do some studying and they do some research and they deal with their own hearts. And for them to come back, I mean, that's a, really, really huge on his part to show what kind of man he is and to be willing to come back and, just make that admission. I've had it happen to me as well. Some of the most vehement opposition sometimes in terms of, what was being said. And then to have a person like that after, they've gone through and opposed it, really felt almost like they were going to attempt to, physically harm you. Not that this particular one I'm thinking about did, but later come back and admit it and agree. Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. This is correct. It can't be any other way. So it's always good to hear those kind of stories. And you just hope that other people, and I'm glad that he shared it on your YouTube channel, because what that does is gives other people an opportunity to, to see a person changing their minds and their convictions as well.
Yeah, and I would point this out. He's not the only person that's done that. This very week of someone who said that due to the YouTube videos, it had completely changed his paradigm, and that he is in the process. In fact, he started his own YouTube channel producing videos to teach covenant eschatology. And he said, I thought this was crazy. I thought this was out of this world. And he said after several months of studying, contemplating, and prayer, he said, and of course he had interacted with me on YouTube, asked a lot of questions and what have you. He would offer objections, which is just perfectly fine. We offer objections because we think our objection has validity and will sustain the position that we hold. That's fine. That's part of profitable dialogue. And he didn't pop up on my channel for a good little while until, I guess it was last week, actually. He came back and said, I just want you to know, I'm starting my own channel. And I'm teaching this because I've come to believe it's absolutely the truth, and it needs to be taught. He said, I certainly don't have the following that you do insofar as the number of subscribers, but he said, you know what, I'm going to keep after it. And so, again, and you know our friend Mickey Pettit. You're familiar with him. You've met him before.
Yes.
And I was teaching a men's Bible class here in Ardmore several years ago when I was still at the Maxwell Church of Christ. And Mickey heard what I was teaching. Now, I didn't know this initially, but he told me afterwards, some years afterwards, He said, Don, the only reason I came in there was to refute you. I wanted to hear what you had to say. So he said, if you'll remember, every night I'd come in there with a notepad and I'd take notes. And he said, but I'd go home to study in order to prove you wrong. Because I thought you were just absolutely out of your mind. Well, I can tell you right now, Mickey is one of the most zealous, active proponents of covenant eschatology that you'll ever find in your life. I mean, he's attending, as a matter of fact, a Baptist dispensational men's Bible class study on Sunday afternoons, I think it is. And boy, he'll call me up and share with me the things that he has said and the reaction of the class. He actually has one or two of the guys in the class that have contacted him and said, I'm not sure I'm understanding. Can you share some more with me? So he's been giving out Glenn Hill's excellent book, Christianity's Great Dilemma, and Mike Had God Tell Time, and, you know, different things like that. And he said this last Bible study that they had, the teacher just got up and posed the question, okay, class, I want everyone in this class to give me your definition of the day of the Lord. Well, hello. If that doesn't open up a can of worms. So, you know, some of the other guys gave their dispensational views, and it came his term, and he just laid it right out. Well, the day of the Lord was any time that God intervened in history to use this nation over here to judge that nation over there, and God was said to come on the clouds, etc. And he said the teacher just stood there for a minute, and he goes, well, I'm going to have to look into that a little deeper because I've never heard that concept. And it allowed Mick to go ahead and to express some things. And now I think he ordered about 3 copies of The Last Days Identified because there are 2 or 3 guys from that class who have said, okay, we want to know more. We need to understand a little bit better what you're saying here. So Mickey is just another example of someone that started out absolutely convinced that they were going to prove this wrong. But he had the integrity of heart, and he had the courage that when he saw that that's what the evidence said, he was willing to change his mind. And so you just have to appreciate people like that so very, very much. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about a gentleman from right here in Oklahoma who is a minister who has a leadership role over a large number of churches, charismatic churches, and yet he said about 3 or 4 years ago, he just started seeing problems with his dispensational world. He said he openly tells the men that he studies with that he has up to 200 men, preachers, that join him on Zoom meetings on a regular basis. And he said, I have told him, we got to stop teaching this rapture stuff. It's destroying our churches. It is not biblical. It is anti-biblical. It's not what the Bible teaches. And as I shared, he told me that a great percentage of those preachers who join him on the Zoom are actually already in agreement with at least the major tenets of covenant eschatology. Well, you know, if you're in agreement with the major tenets, you're in trouble. That's all there is to it. You're headed down the path. There's no turning back. Not for the honest-hearted people. So, yeah, like I said, while this hasn't been one of those weeks where it was just one email after another or one YouTube message after another, what have you, what correspondence there has been has been absolutely wonderful. It is heartening. It's thrilling because you know, okay, here are a couple of guys over the last week or so, 2 weeks at most, that are now in the process of becoming not only disciples, but they're in the process of becoming messengers for the message of realized eschatology. And we just, we're getting more and more people like that all the time. And as one person contacted me last part of last week, sent me a video by this individual. He has always been Sam Frost. He has basically bowed at the feet of Sam Frost, and he produced a video in which he called me every religious epithet that you can imagine. Heretic, false teacher, spawn of the devil, on and on and on and on it went. And this fella, in the video, he made the comment, preterism, and we've taken note of this before, there is such a small, pitifully small handful of these people. They don't amount to anything. And so this guy that sent me the link, he said, it's just abundantly strange and it's weird to me that if we're such a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of people and we're not growing, we're not having any influence, the movement is not making any progress, why do these guys spend so much time making videos, writing articles, getting on Facebook and YouTube and attacking us? And why are they seemingly so obsessed with us? I mean, why don't they take Gamaliel's advice in Acts chapter 5? Leave these men alone. If it's of God, then you can't resist it, because if you do, you'll be found to be fighting against God. If it's not of God, it will come to nothing. But they're too obsessed with us because they know that covenant eschatology is spreading and growing. The movement is growing. And so they feel that urgency and they feel that need to lash out against us and to say something. And, of course, as you and I have said on many, many occasions, their arguments are so often so bad that you literally just shake your head in amazement at how illogical, how unscriptural their arguments are. And yet they seem to think that they are God's gift to the world of theology and that they are the champions and defenders of the truth, when in reality they're not doing a bit of good in the world, not even a little bit. So, with that said, William, have any closing comments in that regard on things going on, like in your world?
No, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing exciting at this point. It's been, I've just been kind of studying a little bit and just trying to follow through on some things that I have going, and that's about it.
Very, very good. All right. Well, we've been focused over the last couple of weeks on Ezekiel chapter 47, 21 and 22, in which the Lord, in this description of the temple and the allotment of the land, told the children of Israel in this idealized, we may use the word spiritualized, however you like to take it, as we have expressed on this program on many occasions, it's very, very difficult to get a firm handle on Ezekiel 40 to 47 because there are so many issues that are in it that can be taken in a purely Messianic way. There are things in it that simply do not fit in a Messianic context, and so there is this strange admixture. And as we shared with you folks, we're not the first to believe this. We're not the first to say Ezekiel 40 to 47 is very, very difficult. It's just, it's almost, an enigma wrapped up in a mystery to try to figure it out. But one thing that is very, very clear And that is in regard to the allotment of the land that is stated here. Now, let's keep this in mind. What is stated in Ezekiel 47, 21 and 22 is not stated in the original land promise given in Genesis chapter 15, 16, and following. In Genesis 15, nor in the book of Numbers, nor in the book of Deuteronomy, nor in the book of Joshua, in which the land allotment, in which the land divisions were made originally as they conquered the land east of Jordan, as they crossed over west and they conquered, as Joshua chapter 21, 43 to 45 says, that God gave them all of the land that he had promised unto their fathers. Not one word of the promises that he had made failed. Okay? So here they are after the conquest of the land, and at the time, and Joshua chapter 20, by the way, gives us a whole lot of the division of the land. But nonetheless, not one time are we told that in the allotment of the land and in the division of the land, they were supposed to make provision for the strangers and the foreigners who dwelt in their midst and who produced children in their midst, be given an equal portion of the land and be considered as natural-born Israelites. Not once. Now, pardon me. A little bit of a caveat here, but it's not a 100% of a caveat. Back in Exodus 12 through 14, when the Lord was instituting the Passover, the Lord said that if there were strangers among them who are not of the seed of Israel, if they wanted to dwell among Israel, and if they wanted to worship the God of Israel, if they wanted to observe the Passover, then they had to be circumcised and keep the law. And if they were circumcised, they were to be considered as, and the language is almost identical, as found here in Ezekiel 47:22, they shall be to you as native born among the children of Israel. So in that sense, now let me be very clear. Even though it says they should be considered native born, it never says they were to be given an equal allotment in the land. So I think that's significant. And the fact that in Ezekiel we have this very clear delineation, very clear iteration that Gentiles, in the truest sense of the word, those who were not born of the seed of Abraham, if they wanted to dwell in the land, if they wanted to worship the God of Israel, and to receive an equal inheritance, and to be considered as a native-born child of Israel. Well, it doesn't say here that they had to be circumcised, but that was part of becoming that proselyte Israelite. By the way, the rabbis in the ancient times, before the first century and during the first century, they said, if any man who is a Gentile, and by that they didn't mean someone of the 10 northern tribes. That was never their concept. But if there is any man who is a Gentile and who wishes to worship the God of Yahweh, the God Yahweh, if he is circumcised and baptizes himself and keeps Torah, he is every bit of an Israelite as, and I'm pretty sure they got it from Numbers and Ezekiel, as a native-born Israelite. Now, I didn't use my respirator before we came on the air, so I apologize for all the voice issues I'm having this evening. Here we are in the midst of this cold snap, and yet my allergies have just been raging and always settles in my throat. But This is so incredibly powerful. And it shows that, well, on the one hand, they had a theology of the equality between Jew and Gentile. Okay? And that quote, or that paraphrase of a quote that I just gave you, is illustration of that. If a man is circumcised, he baptizes himself, and he keeps Torah, he shall be considered every bit of a native-born Israelite as anyone. So there's the theology. Now, did Israel follow through with that? Did they accept the Gentiles, even if a Gentile had become a proselyte, as truly equal to those of the 12 tribes? No, not really. They still kind of look down their nose at them because, after all, they have no genealogical lineage to Abraham. And that means that Messiah cannot come through them. That means the kingdom cannot come through them. And so there was always this reservation, to use that term, on the part of the pure-blooded Israelites who knew their genealogies, they knew their paternity, and they took pride in that paternity, and they defended their lineage vehemently. There was always that barrier between them and the Gentile, who became, according to law, as a native-born member of the nation. So there was, to reiterate, an expressed equality, a doctrinal and theological equality. Because, I mean, after all, if you are a Gentile and you keep Torah and you're circumcised and you baptize yourself, and that's the way it was done under the law, a person baptized themselves. They were not baptized by someone. But anyway, so if you went through that process, okay, you could actually own land in the promised land, which is promised to Israel. That's great. That's cool. That's a, quote, equality. But you know what? On the everyday practical level, Israel did not promise that. And so here comes the Apostle Paul, who believed in all of the promises that God made to Israel. And Paul begins teaching the mystery of God. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, William, I posed the question. If you believed, and I think you said yes, if you believe that Ezekiel 47, 21, and 22 could be one of those texts from the Old Testament, because Paul said that the mystery of God was not known in other ages and at other times as it had been revealed to him through the Spirit and made known to all the nations. Now, Paul wasn't saying that it categorically had never been revealed. He just said it hadn't been understood. I am convinced personally, and like your thoughts on it, I am convinced personally that passages like Isaiah 52, Arise, arise, O virgin daughter of Zion, dust from your feet. Put on your beautiful garments, O Zion, for no longer shall any uncircumcised in heart or in mind enter you ever again. Now, I'm convinced that that verse served as the foundation for the Judaizing doctrine. And conversely, I'm fairly well convinced that Ezekiel 47, 21, and 22 was a ground for Paul's doctrine of Jew and Gentile full equality, according to Ephesians 3, 3-8, with one another in the body of Christ. So what say you?
I think that is a very appropriate point of view, especially when you see, the text, as you mentioned, both in Exodus as well as in Ezekiel particularly, that he is speaking of them in terms of the inheritance. And that is what becoming a son of God is all about from, Galatians 3:26 and 27, which is the same, it's all about Jew and Gentile becoming one. And that is the same as far as the text in Ephesians 3, which is the mystery. And of course, both of those are resurrection-related passages from Revelation 10:7, 11, 15 through 18, and the connection, as you're pointing out in Ephesians 3. So I think it's very appropriate that that's what is involved in that text. And of course, you can add in Romans 11 with that as well, and have the same concept. So it's all about, Jew and Gentile being in the same body, being on equal footing. And that was one of the issues in the New Testament in terms of how salvation was being worked out, with the Jews, in the words of Peter, saying that we believe that we shall be saved in the same manner as they. And of course, that was totally radical to those who had come down from Judea, teaching the brethren that except they kept the law of Moses and were circumcised, etc., they could not be saved. And then here was a group of people that weren't circumcised and were not under the law. And yet he says, here's Peter saying, we're going to be saved as they, which really hones in on the equality aspect of the two.
Yeah, and that, of course, was picked up in the conference in Acts chapter 15, in which that very decision, that very situation of Acts chapter 10 and the conversion of Cornelius was being discussed in the light of the Judaizing teaching that said that the Gentiles have to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses in order to be saved. And, that passage in Isaiah chapter 52, it struck me years and years ago how powerful. I will say this, okay? When I say that I believe that it is a passage that the Judaizers almost undoubtedly relied on for their doctrine, that the Gentiles had to be circumcised in heart and in flesh as well, and I misquoted it a moment ago, but nonetheless, I mean, after all, if you take the position that the New Jerusalem has been established, it's not yet consummated to be sure, but if you take the position that the New Jerusalem has been initiated, and you know that Isaiah 52 is one of those promises of the New Jerusalem, and in this text, it says, no stranger, uncircumcised in heart or in flesh, shall ever enter you again, then my goodness, you have a real dilemma on your hand. There it is in black and white. And so the Judaizers, taking that literally, started teaching, there's Isaiah. Now, what I started to say a moment ago, I must confess, I have never read a single commentator, never, not from any of the eschatological views, not in any discussion of the Judaizers. I have not read a single commentator who said Isaiah 52 is the source of the Judaizing teaching. And to me, that's a bewilderment. Isaiah 52 is so clearly a messianic prophecy. Isaiah 52 is quoted by Paul, how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who preach the glad tidings of good things, and who say, our God reigns. Well, Paul quotes that in Romans chapter 10 as being predictive of his ministry in preaching to the Gentiles as well as to the diaspora Jews. So there's no question whatsoever that this is a messianic prophecy. That's how the Apostle Paul applied it. And so that difficulty would have been, and evidently was, and this is why it's so strange to me, the difficulty was the Judaizers seemed to have Isaiah 52 on their side. No uncircumcised in flesh or in mind will enter you. There they go. There it is, black and white. And yet Paul could say, no, what Isaiah was talking about was not circumcision of the flesh after all. It was circumcision of the heart. Because he discusses it in depth in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Romans chapter 14, in Galatians chapter 5. I mean, on and on you can go in the controversy surrounding circumcision in the New Testament, and Paul over and over and over again. If you are called being circumcised, don't be uncircumcised. If you're called being uncircumcised, do not be circumcised. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He said, in Christ Jesus, there is neither circumcision nor uncircumcision. And those of you who seek to be justified by the law, i.e. through circumcision of the flesh, you're fallen from grace. So, I mean, Paul could not be clearer. He could not be clearer in his teaching that physical circumcision of the flesh has no part in the message of Christ. And so I fail to understand how the commentators fail to see how Isaiah 52 could have been used, I personally think was used, in their teaching that a member of the new creation of Christ must be circumcised in heart as well as in the flesh. But all we have to go on, I have to tell you, all we have to go on is the way that Paul interpreted Isaiah 53. And he excluded physical circumcision, pointedly rejected it, pointedly, categorically said, if you're a Christian and you're circumcised for theological reasons, Christ will profit you nothing. Now, very quick advertisement, paid political advertisement here. My book, Circumcision in the New Creation ? I have received notification that my inventory is supposed to be in between the 22nd and the 28th. I just have to say that I'm very, very disappointed in the response time that I'm getting from my printer, my publisher. Used to, you place an order, you'd have it within a week and a half. It's already been 3 weeks since I placed the order, and now here we are. It's going to be another week and a half before my order gets here. And what's happened a couple of different times lately is, you know, they set you a time and say, well, it'll ship on between the following date. Well, the following date comes, and they go, oh, well, unfortunately, there's been a delay in the shipping. It'll be another 2 weeks. And you're sitting here going, hello, this is not right. This is not the service we once received. I don't know what's happened. I don't know why it's happened, but I sure don't like it. So anyway, that was a little bit of a gripe on the soapbox, but a little bit of a non-paid political advertisement, I should say, in regard to the announcement of my upcoming brand new book. I am very excited about the book. It's right at 240 pages long. To my knowledge, it is the only modern discussion of circumcision in monograph form. I mean, lots and lots and lots of authors obviously discuss circumcision in their commentaries, but insofar as a monographic examination and study of the subject of circumcision and the new creation as a distinct, may I use the term, isolated study, and one that I hope is relatively comprehensive. I can tell you right now, I left a bunch of material out because the book was getting so big, and I didn't want it to become cumbersome, and so I did leave some material out. It's possible that in the years to come I will go ahead and add that material in there because it is good material and it's relevant material. But perhaps I got in a little bit of a hurry, but nonetheless I did leave some material out. So be looking for the book. I'll be announcing that. The minute I get inventory in, I'll be making a YouTube video to introduce it. I'll have announcements, obviously, on Facebook and on my websites as well. We'll be announcing it here as well. So I hope everyone will be looking forward to it. I hope that you will receive the book and come to understand how important the subject of circumcision was in the New Testament time and how important it still is for our understanding of biblical eschatology. And let's look at it like this. We spent considerable time on Ezekiel 45, in which we were told that no one uncircumcised would enter the temple, uncircumcised in flesh. And we discussed circumcision and its importance and the nature of that controversy in the New Testament times, where Paul, after saying, neither circumcision or uncircumcision avails anything but faith which works through love, Galatians 5:16 and Galatians 5, verse 6, but neither circumcision or uncircumcision avails anything but the new creation is what avails, Galatians 5:16. So we spent a good bit of time, and I hope everyone can understand that this doctrine of circumcision is absolutely inextricably and inseparably bound up with the doctrine of the land promises to Israel. You can't talk about the land promises, for instance, of Ezekiel 47, 21, and 22, without talking about circumcision. You see, this goes all the way back to Joshua chapter 5. The generation that had wandered in the wilderness as described in the book of Numbers. And the men had not been circumcised. Now they're on the cusp of entering into the promised land. The time has come for them to receive the promises God made in regard to the land. And yet, guess what? The men who had wandered in the wilderness, that entire generation, had not been circumcised. And so God told Joshua they had to be circumcised before they got to receive and to enter the land. Folks, that's how critical the land promises were. That's how critical the covenant of circumcision was. If you were not circumcised, you were not supposed to receive any inheritance in the land. Now, I got to tell you, William touched on something a couple of moments ago. He didn't expand on it an awful lot, but I know that he's done a tremendous amount of research in this. And that's the subject of the inheritance. You know, in the New Testament, it's kind of interesting that the Greek word kleronomia, I think that's the way you pronounce it, that word translated as inheritance really does not appear all that terrible number of times. It really doesn't. Now, some cognates of it appear a few more times, but the actual word that is translated as inheritance does not appear hundreds of times. And yet, as William hinted at a few moments ago, the story of redemption is all about receiving the inheritance. I mean, there's absolutely no question about this. William, why don't you share with us a few more thoughts on that and how incredibly important it is?
Well, of course, the inheritance is from day one in terms of the gospel from Genesis. That was the goal, and that's what's carried through all the promises made to the fathers as well as to Israel in the type of the land, as you were talking about before, which became, of course, a type of the eternal salvation that's in Christ. And the book of Galatians, I see it as the key word or the key, theme or point in that book is the inheritance. And so many things that are interconnected, interwoven into the subject of the inheritance. And of course, the point that you are currently developing, that, apart from circumcision, they had no inheritance in the land. And then to bring that over from the type to the antitype, as far as, circumcision being required in order to receive the inheritance in the gospel. And you can see that in Colossians, you can see that in Galatians, you can see it in Ephesians. Just about every one of Paul's epistles, he focuses on it and talks about the inheritance and the importance of it. So, you're dealing with sons. The primary, as I've written in the little book that I wrote some years ago on eschatology in Galatians, the primary result, if you please, of being a son of God was to obtain the inheritance. And that's the whole point of it, is that the son has an inheritance. And of course, in contradistinction to that was the slave who had no inheritance, the servant, etc. And that's what, it's another point that Galatians is talking about. And so how was the inheritance given, or to whom was it given? And those are some of the questions that Paul raises in the context. The inheritance was given to those who were sons through the Spirit. And so he asked them, did you receive the Spirit through the law or through the hearing of faith? And the working of miracles, etc. All of those were along with the concept of the inheritance. And of course, a part of their initiation into the faith from the beginning was their circumcision, of course, which we know from Colossians 2:11 and 12, the circumcision made without hands. So all of that was essential in order for them to obtain the inheritance. The only other thing that really stood between them and the receiving of the inheritance was their legal age of accountability. And that's what Paul raises again in Galatians right after he mentions the text in verse 29 where he says, and if you are Christ, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So there's the promise, takes you all the way back to Genesis 3:15, Genesis 12, etc. But he says, if you are Christ, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. But the very next, which is in chapter 4, with that what I call an arbitrary chapter division, he says that a son differs nothing at all from a slave, but is under tutors and governors until the time appointed by the father. So there was a time in which the inheritance had to be received. And of course, that was the time where they were growing to maturity, what the Bible calls when that which is perfect is come. And then, of course, the inheritance would be received. That would be the everlasting kingdom, the time of resurrection, the time of judgment, etc. All of those things that we relate to eschatology. And that's why being a son is an eschatological event. That's taught in 1 John 3, 1 and 2, in Romans 8, Galatians 4, and Luke chapter 20, 34 and 35. And it's a very powerful concept, but it all focuses on the inheritance. Well, I think that's about all the time that we have. If you want to make a last word, go ahead. Looks like Dr. Dunn may have exited the building. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time that we have. It could have been maybe his inhaler or lack of use might have given him a little bit of a problem, but we certainly appreciate it. The message that he brought today and the emphasis on the inheritance. We hope that you will tune in again with us on next week from 6 until 7 p.m. Central Time right here on Two Guys in the Bible on Fulfill Radio. God bless you all. Have a good evening. And until next time, I'm William Bell. And with my good friend, Dr. Don Preston, we want to say good evening to you and God bless. Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Don Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.